Hi, it's Ms. Wydra-Gat, and today we're going to learn our knife safety while making some salsa. Now here's the fun part about salsa. You can make salsa out of fruits, you can make salsa out of vegetables, it can be whatever you like. So today I'm going to make a salsa using some tomatoes, using a green pepper, I'm going to use shallot as my onion, lime, and some garlic, and finally, a couple of leaves of cilantro. So that's what I'm gonna use to make my salsa, but you can create your salsa whatever way you want. The key is when we make our salsa, we're getting healthy, nutritious food, and we're gonna use our knives safely. So let's get started. Whenever I use my knives, I wanna make sure I use a cutting board. The key to knife safety is a sharp knife is safer than the dull knife. I know that doesn't sound right. Dull knife, I can't hurt myself as much, but a sharp knife is safer. When your knife is sharp, you have more control over your knife. So one of the things we do to keep our knives safe is we use a cutting board. Now our cutting boards, we want to make sure they're anchored. This cutting board has a rubber edge on each side, so it's not going to slip. My cutting board I have over here does not have any rubber. So to anchor the cutting board or keep the cutting board from sliding, I'm going to take a damp dish towel. I'm going to lay it on my counter, and then that's going to anchor my cutting board or keep it from slipping and sliding. So I'm going to start off talking about the different kinds of knives we're going to use. I will start off talking about the big knife. Dun, 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 dun. This is called a chef's knife. The parts of the knives are, this is the blade, this is the handle. The safest place to hold your knife is where the blade meets the handle. That's where you get the best grip and the best control with your knife. Now let's talk about my other hand. If my fingers are out like this, that doesn't seem very safe. I don't think it's going to end well for my fingers. So the key is for my non-dominant hand, instead of holding my fingers open, I want to curl my fingers in. So instead of open, I want to tuck the tips of my fingers in. So when I'm cutting, I can make sure I don't lose any tips of my fingers. So I have already, see my fingers are tucked in, and I'm gonna use my chef's knife to cut my lime in half and then put it to the side. I already rinsed off my vegetables, and I have already washed and dried all my vegetables. So I'm gonna take my shallot, and the next thing we're gonna discuss is what side of the food do we cut on. I just cut off the tip of each end of my shallot. Now, if I were to cut the shallot on this round side, see how it could slip? The key word with knife safety is control. So I want to turn my shallot over and I want to cut it on the flat side. When I cut things on the flat side, I have more control and it's not going to slip and slide. So again, we use a sharp knife, and we make sure when we use our sharp knife, our fingers are tucked in and we have control over it. All right, so the other thing with the chef's knife is it's a rocking motion. So it's tip, heel. The tip of the knife is the point, heel is where the handle and blade meet. So tip, heel. So when I cut this onion and I took off the top layer, I'm going tip, heel, tip, heel. Notice the point of my knife has not left the cutting board. So I'm going to turn it around, do the same thing, tip, heel. And see how those fingers are tucked in? So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually doing what's called mincing. Mincing is a very small cut of the knife. And it's a rocking motion back and forth, making my onion very, very, very small. So that's what we do when we mince our foods. When I wipe off the knife, I'm not going towards the blade. I'm going away from the blade. And then I'm gonna use my hand or another kitchen tool and take my onion and put it in my container for my salsa. It's gonna be so pretty, my salsa. Next knife I want to talk about is going to be a serrated knife. Here is my serrated knife. The reason it's a serrated knife is because there's teeth. So I will cut it in half. When I use my serrated knife, I'm gonna use a sawing motion and I'm gonna go back and forth. It's great, serrated knives are excellent for things like bread and tomatoes that have this skin and need a little extra help. Oh man, I'm starting to cry now. It must have been all that sadness if people aren't using their knives correctly. Or it could be the fact that I just cut an onion and now the onion's making me cry. So again, I'm gonna add the pretty red color of the tomato with the pretty white in my container. Absolutely amazing, delicious. So your food, if your goal with your food is not just to have it taste yummy, but also look beautiful, chances are it's gonna be pretty healthy for you too. All right, so cilantro. Cilantro are little leaves. Some people hate it, right? Some people love it. It's one of those foods you either love or hate. I'm gonna use my paring knife for the cilantro. So a paring knife is shorter than your chef's knife, but it has a straight edge like your chef's knife and not a saw edge like your serrated knife. So when I use this knife, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut little strips. Now notice each knife, I still hold it at the same spot. I'm holding it where the blade and the handle meet. So I'm gonna do little strips. Oop. All right, so, oh, more color. Another thing I like to use and create with my salsa is some green pepper. And I use a paring knife with my green pepper. Now the one thing I do with my paring knife is I want to get out this middle part. So what I do is, see, I'm just poking that paring knife down to try to get out with my pepper. I cut it and it comes right out. Look at that. Oh, we don't want to eat the seeds. Never eat the seeds of the pepper. So I can choose which knife I want to use now. I think I'm going to use my chef's knife. And notice how I was thinking about which knife. Yes, I could use my paring knife to cut it, but you tend to want to pick a knife that is the correct size job for what you're doing. So I could use the paring knife, or I could use my chef's knife. Now another type of cut you can do is called a chop. A chop is just where you do that rocking motion, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it's kind of rough, right? That's your chop. Strips using my chef's knife. Before I get to the dice step, I have to do what's called a julienne step. So julienne is where I cut into a small strip. So that's my julienne strip. Once I have my julienne strips, again, I have the food on the flat side, tuck my fingers in. I'm gonna dice. Now notice I'm feeding the food to the knife, not the knife to the food. It's not like, what was that game? Fruit Ninja? This is not safe, all right? So now I have a dice. So here's a chop, and here is a dice. So chop is bigger, dice is smaller. And then mince, which I did with the onion. I'm gonna also show you how to mince garlic. Garlic is so fun. It's my husband's probably most favorite thing to season food with. He's always like, more garlic. So garlic comes in these cloves, right? They come in these cloves. And what I'm gonna do, I gotta take the edges off, just like I did with the onion. So I'm gonna cut off the top, I'm gonna cut off the bottom, and then this is the fun part. I'm gonna smash my garlic. All right, so smashing my garlic. I'm gonna put the flat end of my chef's knife down. I am not gonna have it upwards at all, sharp part towards skin. No, thank you. So I'm gonna put the sharp part up, or sharp part down. And then I'm gonna bang it with my fist. Sounded good, huh? Bang it with my fist. I'm gonna take off the outer layer. And then I'm gonna mince what I have left. So first, tuck my fingers in. I'm gonna cut in a couple little strips, like I was julienning it. And then I'm gonna turn it to the side, and I'm gonna do that rocking motion. And then we can go back and forth. Did my point leave this cutting board? No, the point did not leave the cutting board. The point is staying on the cutting board. And that is how you mince. Rocking motion back and forth. Again, I poke away, not towards myself. A few other things when you're making your salsa. So I'm actually gonna spend some time and add more tomatoes because that's my preference. I like extra tomatoes. A few other ingredients you can use in your salsa. You can use some black pepper. Ooh, pretty color. You definitely want to use salt. Salt is a preservative and a flavor enhancer. And the recipe we share with you gives you an exact measurement. And then you can use a couple red pepper flakes. Some people like their spicy. I'm not overly spicy. I like my food to be beautiful, but not overly spicy. And then what you do is you mix this all together, and then I'm gonna take a lime, and I'm just gonna squeeze the lime on top. And that is how I make my favorite salsa. Quick review, when using a knife, a sharper knife is safer than a dull knife. We have several different knives to choose from. There's a paring knife, which is small, and you use it for your fruits and vegetables. Chef's knife, which is much larger. And a serrated knife, which comes in all different shapes and sizes. This is just my favorite serrated knife. And it has a tooth, like a saw kind of edge. When you hold a knife where the blade meets the handle. You always use a cutting board because a sharp knife is safer than a dull knife. Use a rocking motion, and you tuck the non-dominant hand fingers in. A few other things as I get ready to clean up over here. When you clean up your knives, you do not want to put them in the hot soapy water. What you want to do is you want to wash them separately next to the sink or on top of the sink. If you put it in that hot soapy water, you may not see the knife. And then you reach your hand in there and you could cut your fingers. Another thing about cleanup and knives, when you clean them up, make sure you're not doing the point end towards your hand. You want the point away from you. And the other big safety thing with knives, if one of these knives were to fall, don't catch a falling knife. You go to catch that falling knife, you could cut your hand. So I hope you enjoyed this. You come up with your own. You can make fruit salsa, you can make vegetable salsa with all the different kinds of vegetables or fruit you like. Thank you and enjoy your knife safety.